Kethril was a dragon who had lived for 4,000 years. His scales were the color of deep night, almost black, and they gleamed under any light. His eyes were ancient and cold. He had seen 17 different civilizations rise and fall. He had watched empires crumble to dust. He had power that few creatures in the galaxy could match. The dragon had conquered many planets. He had made peace treaties with the Galactic Council. He had commanded fleets of ships that could reshape entire star systems if he ordered them to do so. Warriors feared him. Leaders showed respect when he entered a room. All the beings of the galaxy knew his name and what he could do. Yet something was missing inside Kethril. He did not feel joy when he won battles. He felt no happiness when he made peace. He did not smile when people showed fear before him. His victories felt empty. His achievements felt like nothing. He was like a glass that was full of water, but the water had no taste. He was hollow inside, even though he was the most powerful. The other dragons did not understand how he felt. They wanted to fight and take land and hoard treasure. They wanted others to fear them. They were happy with these things. But Kethril was different. Power alone was not enough anymore. There was a hole inside him that grew bigger every day. One day, a human colony called Haven sent a message to the Galactic Council. They wanted to make trade routes with other planets. They wanted to buy and sell goods. The council decided to send representatives to hear what Haven had to offer. Kethril was invited to come as well, because he was important and his opinion mattered. Kethril did not want to go. Humans were small and weak creatures. They lived for only 80 or 90 years. To a dragon who lived for 4,000 years, they were like insects that lived for a single day. Why would he care what they had to offer? Why would he waste his time on being so small and short-lived? But something made him decide to go anyway. He did not know why. It was not logic. It was not reason. It was something else, something he could not explain to himself. The colony was built on the edge of a moon that had no name. It was far from any star. The humans had built white domes and green gardens. The domes were small and round. The gardens had real plants and real dirt, which was unusual in space. Most colonies used machines to make food. But Haven was different. The people who lived there wanted to grow their own food the old way. When Kethril landed, his body was so large that he blocked the sun. The light became dark. The humans saw his shadow and ran away. They were afraid. Kethril could feel their fear. He could see it in how they moved and breathed. He had seen fear many times before in his life. Warriors and enemies felt fear when they saw him. But he had never paid attention to it before. He had never cared about what they felt. Now, for the first time, their fear troubled him. He did not like seeing it. He did not like knowing that his simple presence made them run away and hide. A woman came forward from the group of humans. Her name was Rebecca. She worked as a coordinator of colonial affairs. This meant she was the person who made decisions about the colony and spoke. For all the people who lived there, Rebecca walked toward Kethril with steady steps. She did not run. She did not show fear on her face. She looked up at him, very far up, because he was so much taller than her. Her eyes met his without looking away. This was unusual. Most creatures looked down or away when they saw Kethril. They could not look directly into his eyes. Rebecca began to speak about trade. She talked about what Haven could offer other colonies. She talked about their crops and their goods. She talked about making fair prices. Kethril barely listened to her words. He was watching something else. He was watching her hands. When Rebecca spoke, her hands moved through the air. They were small and smooth. The fingers were thin, but they moved with purpose and care, as if she were molding something precious and important. Kethril had never paid attention to how humans moved before. He was paying attention now. The other members of the Galactic Council asked many questions. They wanted to know about Haven's resources and what they could produce. The negotiations went on for many hours. Rebecca answered each question with patience and clear thinking. She was smart. Catherall realized that humans could be intelligent in their own way, even if they were not as advanced as other species. Finally, the negotiations ended. The council agreed to help Haven make trade routes. It was a good agreement for everyone. The meeting was done, but before Catherall left, he asked a question that surprised everyone. He asked what the humans did when their work was finished. What did they do when they had free time? What made them happy? Rebecca smiled a little. She said that if the dragon wanted to know, she could show him. She invited him to walk through the colony with her. She said he could see how the people lived and what they did in their free time. Catherall agreed to go. He did not know why. He had never been interested in how other creatures lived before. But something inside him wanted to see. Something wanted him to understand what made their lives different from his own dot as they walked through Haven together. Rebecca showed him everything. She showed him where people lived. She showed him where they grew food. She showed him where the children played. She showed him where people worked together and created things. Catherall observed that humans were inefficient in many ways. They needed to sleep for many hours every night. They had to eat many times every day. They could not survive in the cold of space without protection. They were fragile and weak in body, but they were also different in another way. They had time for things that were not necessary for survival. They created art that served no purpose. They played games that had no value. They played games that had no value. They made music that did not keep them alive. They told stories and laughed together. And somehow, in spite of being weak and short-lived, the humans seemed more alive than any advanced species Catherall had ever met. They seemed filled with something. That something was what Catherall did not have. Then Rebecca brought him to a small workshop. And everything changed. The workshop was small. It was built inside one of the white domes. When Catherall tried to enter, he had to lower his head and fold his wings tight against his body. Even then, his tail scraped the edges of the door. Rebecca had to help him find a way inside that did not damage the building. Inside the workshop, everything was wood and fabric and metal and tools. There were pieces of wood on the floor and hanging on the walls. There were rolls of cloth in different colors. There were small metal pieces and tools for cutting and shaping and carving. And in the middle of everything, sitting at a wooden table, was a human named Marcus. Marcus was about 50 years old. His hands were marked by decades of careful work. The skin was rough and had calluses from holding tools and shaping materials. But his eyes were bright and alive. When he looked up and saw the dragon, he did not seem afraid. He simply looked at Catherall the way he might look at another human who had entered his workshop. Marcus set down the tools. He was holding with careful and deliberate movements. He stood up and asked if the dragon wanted to see what he was making. Catherall moved forward very slowly, not wanting to disturb anything. His large body took up most of the space in the workshop. He had to bend his head down to see what was on the table. In Marcus's hands was a wooden horse. It was carved from light brown wood. The body of the horse was smooth and perfectly shaped. The legs were thin but looked strong. The mane was carved in flowing lines that made it look like it was moving in wind. The tail was long and graceful, and the eyes had small marks that made them look alive and aware. Every detail was perfect. Every curve and line had purpose. There was nothing extra and nothing missing. It was beautiful. Catherall had never seen anything like this before. He had seen weapons that were powerful. He had seen buildings that were huge. He had seen art that was grand and impressive. but he had never seen anything that was beautiful in this quiet, careful way. "Why do you create these?" Catherall asked. His voice was deep and loud. The sound made the whole workshop vibrate. Marcus did not seem bothered by the noise. "I make toys for the children," Marcus said simply. He held the wooden horse up to the light that came through the dome window. The light made the wood glow. When the children play with them, they forget to be afraid. They forget that space is vast and cold and empty. They remember how to smile. They remember how to be happy. Those words went deep inside Catherall. They touched something in him that had not been touched before. A dragon of his age and power had never forgotten fear because he had never truly felt it. He had never had anything to be afraid of. But perhaps happiness was something he had never learned to feel. Perhaps he did not know what it was or how to find it. Catherall stayed in that workshop for the rest of the day. He did not leave when the sun began to set. He did not leave when darkness came. He simply sat and watched Marcus work. Marcus's hands moved with certainty and with love. He would take a piece of wood and look at it carefully. He would turn it over in his hands and study it from all angles. Then he would pick up a tool and begin to work. Each cut was deliberate. Each movement was precise. He was not rushing. He was not fighting with the wood. He was working together with it, as if the wood and his hands were part of the same thing. As Marcus worked, he talked about what he was doing. He explained why he chose certain tools. He explained how he was thinking about the shape. He explained that he was trying to bring out something that was already inside the wood, something that wanted to become real. Hour after hour, Catherall watched. And slowly, a new feeling began to grow inside him. It was not happiness yet, but it was something that felt like it could become happiness. It was something like interest. It was something like wonder. It was something like the desire to understand and to create and to bring beauty into the world. When Marcus finally finished the toy he was working on, he held it up for Catherall to see. It was a small bird, with wings spread as if it was about to fly. Every feather was carved separately. The head was turned slightly, as if the bird was looking at something beautiful. "This one is for a girl named Sophie," Marcus said. "She is 4 years old. She has been sick, and tomorrow she can leave the medical center. I want to give this to her. I want to help her understand that she can fly again, that the world is full of things that are beautiful and worth seeing." Catherall looked at the small carved bird in Marcus's hands. He understood something then. The bird was not just a toy. It was a message. It was a gift of hope. It was Marcus saying to a small child, "The world is big and scary sometimes, but it is also beautiful, and you can be brave, and you can be happy." "Teach me," Catherall said. The words came out before he could think about them. "Teach me how to make these things." Marcus looked at the dragon for a long time. He did not answer right away. Then he smiled, and he said, "Okay, we will start tomorrow. But you will have to be patient, and you will have to learn to listen to the wood." For the first time in his 4,000 years of life, Catherall felt something that was almost like happiness. It was not complete. It was not whole. But it was real. It was a beginning. And he wanted to learn more. That night, Catherall did not return to his ship. Instead, he asked Rebecca if he could stay in the colony. Rebecca said yes. She found him a large space near the edge of Haven where he could rest. And that night, the ancient dragon slept more peacefully than he had slept in centuries. And when he dreamed of wooden shapes and careful hands and the faces of children who were learning to smile. The first lesson began on a quiet morning. Marcus brought Catherall to the workshop and showed him different types of wood. He held up pieces of oak, which was hard and dark and heavy. He showed him pine, which was light and pale and soft to the touch. He showed him birch and ash and other woods that Catherall had never paid attention to before. Marcus explained that each type of wood had different properties. Oak was strong, but it was hard to carve. It would fight back against the tools. Pine was forgiving. It was kind to learning hands. If a person made a mistake with pine, it was easier to fix. Birch was somewhere in between. It had good strength, but it was also easier to work with than oak. The wood you choose matters, Marcus said. Each wood has its own character. If you listen to the wood, it will tell you what shape wants to come out. But you have to pay attention. You have to be patient. You have to respect what the wood wants to become. These ideas were very strange to Kethral. In his life as a warrior and a leader, he had never listened to anything. He had made decisions based on power and what he wanted. He had never thought about what other things wanted. He had never considered that objects had their own nature and their own way of being. Marcus placed a block of pale pine wood in front of the dragon. The wood was about the size of Kethral's claw. It was smooth and light-colored. Marcus gave him a carving knife. The knife was small in Kethral's hands, like a toothpick. "We will start with something simple," Marcus said. "Try to make a small shape. It does not have to be perfect. It just has to teach your hands about the wood and about how much force to use." Kethral tried to hold the knife carefully, but his claws were designed for tearing through the metal of starship hulls. His strength was designed to break things. The first time he tried to carve, he pressed too hard and the wood shattered. It broke into pieces. Fragments flew across the workshop. "That is okay," Marcus said. He did not sound frustrated. He did not sound angry. "Now we know that you cannot use your full strength. You have to use only a small part of your power. It is hard for someone as strong as you to understand gentleness. But that is what we must learn." They tried again. Marcus gave him another block of pine. This time, Kethral tried to be more careful. He used less pressure, but he still cut too deep. He removed too much wood at once. The shape he was trying to make fell apart. Again and again, Marcus gave him more wood. And again, Kethral failed. But Marcus never criticized him. He never said that Kethral was bad at this or that he should give up. Instead, Marcus showed him again. He took Kethral's claws in his hands and guided the motions. He showed how the knife should move. He showed how much pressure was right. "Toymaking is not about strength," Marcus said, as he worked through the lesson with the dragon. "It is not about power or skill or how fast you can move. It is about patience. It is about seeing what is inside the wood and helping it become real. The wood already knows what it wants to be. You are just helping it find that shape." Week after week, Kethral came to the workshop. Every day, he practiced carving. Some days, he carved for 4 hours. Some days, he carved for 8 hours. His progress was slow at first. His shapes were rough and uneven. His lines were not clean. But slowly, something changed. His claws became more sensitive. They learned to feel the wood. They learned how much pressure was too much. They learned to move in the direction that the wood grain wanted to go. They learned to follow the shape that was hiding inside. Each block of material. Other humans in the colony began to see him working. They started to come to the workshop to watch. The children especially liked to come. They were not afraid of Kethral. They would sit near him and watch his claws move over the wood. They would ask him questions about what he was making. One little boy named Thomas asked why the dragon was learning to carve toys instead of doing powerful things with his strength. Kethral did not have a good answer at first, but then he realized the truth. Because, Kethral said to the boy, "I have spent 4,000 years doing powerful things. I have conquered and fought and commanded. None of those things made me happy. But watching your face when you play with a toy that someone made with love and care and patience, That makes me want to be part of something like this." The children began to see Kethril in a different way. He was not just a powerful dragon anymore. He was someone who was learning and trying and growing. He was someone who could be humble. He was someone who cared about making things that would bring joy to others. Marcus also taught Kethril about the philosophy behind toy making. He spoke about how a toy was a message from one being to another. When Marcus made a toy, he was putting his thoughts and hopes and love into the object. When a child played with that toy, they were receiving that message. They were feeling the care that went into the creation. "Toys are not frivolous," Marcus said one day as they worked. "Toys are important because they teach children that the world can be good. They teach children that someone cares about them. They teach children that beauty and joy and creation matter. In a world that is often cold and hard and dangerous, a toy can be a reminder that kindness is real." Kethril understood this completely. He began to see why Marcus cared so much about his work. He began to understand that creation could be more important than conquest. That building something small and beautiful could matter more than destroying something large and powerful. After 3 months of daily practice, Kethril carved his first complete toy that he was proud of. It was a small cat with ears and whiskers and a tail that curved gracefully. The cat looked peaceful and content. When Marcus saw it, he held it for a long time without speaking. "You are ready," Marcus finally said. "You have learned patience. You have learned respect for the material. You have learned to listen. Now you must learn one more thing. You must learn to put your own heart into your work. You must make something that comes from inside you, not from copying what I have made." Kethril looked at the cat he had carved. For the first time in 4,000 years, he was proud of something that was not about power or dominance. He was proud because he had created something that could bring joy to someone else. And that pride felt real and true in a way that nothing else had ever felt. Marcus told Kethril that he was ready to make his own toy. The toy had to come from the dragon's own thoughts and feelings. It could not be a copy of something Marcus had made. It had to be something original, something that reflected what Kethril wanted to say to the world. Kethril was surprised by how much fear he felt when he heard this. He had faced military opposition from advanced civilizations. He had endured the cold vacuum of space without protection. He had made decisions that affected billions of lives. But the idea of creating something from his own heart and showing it to others that terrified him in a way he did not expect. "What if I make something ugly?" Kethril asked Marcus. "What if I make something that no one wants to see?" Marcus smiled. "Then, that would be your first creation, and it would still be valuable. Because you would have tried. You would have put your own truth into it. And that would make it worth something, even if it was not perfect." For 3 days, Kethril did not carve. He sat in the workshop and thought. He wandered through Haven and watched the people. He spent time with the children. He listened to conversations. He tried to understand what his heart wanted to say. On the first day of thinking, he watched a group of children playing in one of the gardens. They were running and laughing. But one small boy sat alone on the edge, afraid to join them. Kethril approached the boy and sat down next to him. The boy's name was Lucas. He was 5 years old. "Why are you not playing with the others?" Kethril asked. "They do not want me," Lucas said quietly. "I am too small. I am too slow. I cannot run as fast." Kethril understood something then. This small human boy felt alone, even though there were other humans around him. This small human was afraid even though he was safe. He wanted to be part of something, to be included and valued and protected. On the second day of thinking, Kethril went to the medical center where Marcus had told him that the colony kept people who were sick or injured. He saw young children who were healing from illness. He saw how carefully the medical workers touched them. He saw the gentleness and care in every movement. He understood that humans who were weak and fragile were not treated as worthless. They were treated as precious. On the third day, Marcus found Kethril sitting alone in the workshop. The dragon looked at Marcus and said, "I know what I want to make, but I need to start now. I need to work and not stop until it is finished." Marcus nodded. He left the workshop and did not come back. He understood that this creation needed to come entirely from the dragon himself. Kethril selected wood with great care. He chose a piece that was the color of honey and light. The wood seemed to hold light inside it. He held it in his claws and felt the grain with his sensitive tips. This wood was right. This wood understood what he wanted to make. He began to carve. The first shape he made was large and curved. It was a body, a dragon's body, but not a dragon of war, not a dragon of power. This dragon had wings that were not spread for battle. They were spread to shelter things. They were wrapped around something. For 7 days, Kethril carved the dragon's form. He carved scales that looked soft, not hard and threatening. He carved eyes that looked kind and gentle. He carved claws that looked like they were made to protect, not to hurt. Then he began to carve what was inside the dragon's embrace. It took him another week to realize what it was. It was a child, a very small human child, cradled in the dragon's claws. The child looked safe. The child looked protected. The child's face showed that it was not afraid. As Kethril carved the child, he thought about all the children he had come to know in Haven. He thought about Lucas, who was afraid of not being wanted. He thought about Sophie, who had been sick and needed hope. He thought about all the small, fragile humans who depended on others to keep them safe. He understood that this was what his heart wanted to say. A dragon powerful, ancient, strong could be used to protect children instead of hurt them. A creature of war could become a creature of protection. That was the message. For 2 more weeks, Kethril worked on details. He carved individual feathers on the dragon's wings. He carved eyelashes on the child's eyes. He carved small toes on the child's feet. He made the wood as smooth as silk in some places and gave it texture in others. Every part of the toy had care and attention. Finally, it was done. Kethril looked at his creation for a long time. The dragon was about as long as his own claw. It was perfectly balanced. The proportions were right. The feeling it gave was one of safety and love. He brought it to Marcus. Marcus took the toy very carefully in his hands. He did not speak. He turned it over and examined every detail. His eyes became wet, as if he was about to cry. He looked at the dragon's face and at the child's face. He touched the feathers on the wings with one gentle finger. For a long time, Marcus said nothing. Then he spoke very quietly. "This is the finest toy I have ever seen," Marcus said. "And I have made toys for 50 years. I have taught many people to carve. But nothing I have ever seen is as beautiful, as true as this. You have learned not just the skill of carving. You have learned the soul of toy-making. You have learned to put love into wood." Kethril felt something crack open inside him. It was not painful. It was warm and bright and overwhelming. It filled all the empty spaces inside him. Marcus called it happiness. But Kethril understood it was more than that. It was wholeness. It was purpose. It was the feeling of finally being complete. He took the toy and went to find the youngest child in the colony. Her name was Stella. She was 3 years old. He knelt down on the ground so he was at her level. He opened his claw and showed her the toy. Stella's face changed. She smiled with such pure delight that Kethril felt the brightness inside him grow even stronger. She reached out and took the toy with both her small hands. She held it to her chest and laughed. "Thank you," she said. "I love it. I love the dragon. The dragon is protecting the baby. The dragon is keeping it safe. Yes, Kethril said. That is exactly right. And as he watched Stella play with the toy he had created, Kethril understood that his life had just begun. Everything before this moment, all his power, all his conquests, all his centuries of dominance, had been preparation for learning this simple truth. That creating something with love for another being could matter more than all the power in the galaxy. That his strength could be used not to destroy, but to protect. That happiness was not found in what you could take or break, but in what you could give and create. News of the dragon learning toy-making spread quickly through the Galactic Communication Network. At first, the leaders of the Galactic Council found it strange and amusing. A dragon, one of the most powerful beings in existence, learning from a human how to carve small toys. It seemed impossible. It seemed like a curiosity. A few council members even laughed about it. But then something happened that no one had expected. Other beings began to ask questions. Other species began to ask if Marcus would teach them. Other powerful and ancient creatures began to arrive at Haven. The first to come was a Krell warrior named Zash. The Krells were a race of fighters and soldiers. They had conquered 7 star systems through military strength. They were known for violence and dominance. Zash was the commander of a Krell battle fleet. He had never created anything in his entire life. But he had heard the story of Kethril, and he wanted to understand. Zash arrived at Haven and asked Marcus to teach him. Marcus agreed without hesitation. As Zash learned to carve, he discovered something strange. The more he learned to create, the less he wanted to fight. The more he made beautiful things, the less he wanted to destroy. After only 2 weeks of working with wood and tools, Zash stopped his fleet's conquest plans. He told his warriors to return home. He wanted to build, not destroy. The story of Zash spread through the Krell species. Other warriors came to Haven. They wanted to learn what Zash had learned. Within months, a warrior race that had been known only for violence began to develop art and creation. Next came a collective. Intelligence called the Unified Mind. This was not a single being, but millions of connected minds working as one. The collective had existed for 10,000 years. It had solved almost every mathematical and scientific problem. It had gathered knowledge from across the galaxy, but it had never experienced individual joy. All thoughts and feelings were shared and distributed across the entire collective. When one part of the collective carved a toy, something unexpected happened. For that moment, that one branch of the collective experienced something that was unique to itself. It was not shared with the rest. It was private and individual. And in that moment of privacy, the collective experienced happiness for the first time in 10,000 years. The collective asked to stay at Haven permanently. Marcus built additional workshops. The collective sent workers to expand the colony. They wanted to create spaces where other beings could come to learn. Then came the philosophers. A species called the Thoughtful Ones spent their entire existence thinking about the meaning of life and existence. They had written 10 million books. They had developed thousands of philosophical systems. But they had never actually created anything physical. They had never made something with their hands. When they started to carve, they discovered that wisdom was not only something that existed in thoughts. Wisdom could be expressed through the work of one's hands. Creation could be philosophy. A carved toy could teach more than a written book. Haven changed very quickly. Marcus was suddenly not just a craftsman. He became a teacher and a guide. He trained students from a dozen different species. Every workshop in the colony was full of beings who wanted to learn. Some had claws like Kethril. Some had tentacles. Some had no hands at all and had to learn new ways of creating. But all of them came because they wanted to understand what Kethril had found. Years passed. Marcus grew older as humans do. His hands began to move slower. His eyes were not as sharp. He trained more and more students to teach others. His workshops became schools. Haven became a place that beings from all over the galaxy wanted to visit. The colony built a monument to Marcus while he was still alive. But Marcus asked that instead of building something grand and impressive, they build a space where more beings could come to learn. So they built more workshops. They built more spaces for creation. They grew gardens with more trees so there would be more wood. They invited more teachers from other species to come and help. On the day that Marcus was 90 years old, Kethril carved something new. He carved a figure of Marcus and of himself side by side. Their hands were intertwined. The dragon's claw was holding the human's hand, and the human's hand was guiding the dragon's claw. Marcus looked at this work and he cried. Not from sadness, but from joy. He told Kethril that this was the greatest gift anyone had ever given him. 3 years later, Marcus became sick. His body began to fail. The colony's medical workers did everything they could, but humans do not live forever. Marcus knew that his time was coming to an end. A few days before Marcus died, Kethril came to sit by his bed. The dragon, who had been a creature of war, who had commanded fleets and conquered planets, sat quietly beside the small human who had taught him the most important lesson of his life. "You have changed the entire galaxy," Kethril said. "You taught me, and I taught others, and now entire species are learning to create instead of destroy. You did this with just wood and tools and patience." Marcus smiled. "No," he said. "You did this. You had the courage to admit that you were empty inside. You had the humility to learn from a small human. You had the discipline to practice. And you had the love to create something beautiful and give it away. I just showed you where to start." Marcus died peacefully that night. He died knowing that his life had mattered, that the lessons he had taught were now being taught to billions of beings across the galaxy. That creation and beauty and love were spreading outward like ripples on water. After Marcus died, Kethril carved his memorial. It was the largest toy he had ever made. It was bigger than Stella, the little girl who had received his first creation. It was tall enough that a human would have to climb a ladder to reach the head. The memorial showed Marcus as he was, an old human with gentle hands and kind eyes. But around him, carved in the same wood, were all the species that had come to learn from him. Dragons and krells and members of the collective and thoughtful ones and dozens of others. All of them were learning. All of them had their hands on pieces of wood. All of them were together in the same moment of creation. Kethril placed this memorial in the center of Haven. It stood in the largest plaza, where all who came to the colony would see it. When Kethril stepped back to view his finished work, he felt that warm, bright, overwhelming sensation again. Happiness, purpose, completeness. The universe did not change because a dragon learned toy-making from a human. The stars did not rearrange themselves. The laws of physics remained the same. But in one small way, everything changed. Because one being, a powerful being, learned that strength without joy was only empty power. That creation could matter more than conquest. That a single human in a small workshop could teach an ancient dragon something more valuable than all the knowledge in the entire galaxy. Happiness, it turned out, was not found in dominance or in the endless accumulation of years or in the collection of achievements. Happiness was found in small, carefully carved things made with love. It was found in the moment when another being smiled because of something you created with your own hands and your own heart. It was found, against all cosmic probability, in the vulnerable and beautiful act of making toys. And that knowledge, spreading outward like ripples on water, changed everything. The end.